Let Garmin Support show you how to replace the depth adjustment collar on the Force Pro trolling motor. For this process, you will need a number 1 and number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, 2.5mm hex bit, zip ties, clippers, and the replacement depth adjustment collar. You will also need a wooden 2x4 or something suitable to place between the 2 scissors on the mount. When assembling the motor, you must use non-power tools to install all the parts, observing the torque specifications when provided. Using power tools to assemble the motor may damage the component and void the warranty. For this install, the trolling motor will need to be stowed and deployed. 2 people are recommended for positioning between stowed and deployed positions to avoid injury or damage. First, remove power from the trolling motor and disconnect the transducer cable from the back of the chart plotter. Remove the 4 screws holding the shaft cap using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Lift the top of the shaft cap. Next, disconnect the USB cable. Push the lever and disconnect the data connection. If you have a sonar connection, disconnect the sonar cable. Now remove the shaft cap. Clip the zip ties holding the positive and negative wires using the clippers. Pull back the rubber sleeves on the power cables to expose the terminals. Next, loosen the set screws on the power and ground cables using a 2.5mm hex bit driver. Disconnect the power and ground cables in the shaft cap. Next, remove the 4 small black screws holding the coil cable bracket in the shaft cap using a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. Slide the cable bracket off the coil cable and remove it from the opening on the bottom of the shaft cap housing. Now remove the coil cable from the shaft cap. Remove the cable clips holding the transducer cable and coil cable together. Keep these in a safe place. They will need to be used again. Remove the bracket that secures the power cable using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Remove the 2 cable clips holding both power and transducer cables to the mount using a 3mm hex bit driver. Remove the cable clips holding the transducer cable and coil cable together. Remove the power cable through the mounts channel, followed by the transducer. Push the square rubber grommet through the bottom of the shaft cap and remove it from the transducer cable. Take the transducer cable and pull it through the square hole. Remove the two bolts, washers, and nuts at the base of the shaft cap using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Then, remove the rubber covers from the power and ground wires to give clearance to pull the cables from the shaft. Remove the bottom of the shaft cap housing from the shaft along with the rubber grommet below the shaft cap. Be aware of the power and data cables. Followed by the transducer cable. Slide the rubber wedge off the shaft. Now deploy the trolling motor. Remove the 4 screws holding the depth limiter with a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. Then remove the depth limiter and the 2 half-moon pieces holding the shaft in the steering servo. The next steps will require 2 people to remove the shaft from the steering servo. You will also need a wooden 2x4. Have one person deploy the trolling motor halfway. The other person can then place something suitable between the 2 scissors of the mount to provide extra security. The person deploying should hold the pull cable in place as an extra safety measure when removing the shaft. Be careful when loosening the adjustment collar. The motor and shaft will drop down when loosened. Now loosen the depth adjustment collar while holding the bottom of the motor with one hand. Slide the shaft down and remove the shaft from the steering servo housing. Make sure none of the cables catch on the steering servo. Carefully pull the transducer cable through the steering servo housing. The trolling motor can now be fully deployed with the shaft removed. Feed the power and data cables through the replacement depth adjustment collar. The shaft is key to fit the steering system one way only. Place your 2x4 or suitable brace between the two scissors on the mount. Feed the power and data cables through the servo housing. Align the shaft key to the bottom of the steering system and insert the shaft and push it up through the top. Tighten the depth adjustment collar on the base of the steering system. It may be helpful to move the motor mount up about halfway to make it easier to install the shaft. Insert the two half-moon pieces of the depth limiter collar on top of the steering servo housing. Align the two outer halves of the depth limiter collar and tighten the 4 screws using a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. Align the rubber wedge into the slot along the shaft. Feed the transducer cable through the bottom of the shaft cap. Feed the transducer cable completely through the square hole in the shaft cap. Then, feed the cables through the bottom of the shaft cap. Next, align the bottom of the shaft cap on the notch of the shaft and slide it down on the rubber wedge. Install the new set of bolts, washers, and nuts in the base of the shaft cap using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Install the grommet on the transducer cable. Take your transducer cable and route through the cable channel located on the side of the mount. Then, follow with the power cable through the same channel. Make sure to route the transducer through the channel first. This will make installation easier. Place the cable clips over the transducer and power cable. Secure the cable clips with the 2 screws using a 3mm hex bit driver. Place the remaining cable clip in the slot on the side of the mount, securing the power and transducer cables using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Place the cable clips back on to hold the transducer cable and the coil cable together. Then, place the rubber covers back on the power and ground wire. Insert the coil cables into the bottom of the shaft cap. Slide the cable bracket on the coil cable and reattach it to the bottom of the shaft cap housing. Tighten the 4 screws provided in the service kit using a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. Using a 2.5mm hex bit driver, tighten the set screws on the power and ground cables. Slide the rubber covering back over the power and ground cables. Secure the power and ground cables to the bottom of the shaft cap using 4 zip ties. Reconnect the USB cable and the data cable to the antenna box. Place the lid on the shaft cap. Install the 4 screws to secure the lid of the shaft cap using a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver. Finally, plug the GT56 UHD transducer back into the 12-pin port on the chart plotter. Now connect the trolling motor to power. Test the trolling motor by powering on from the power button located on the E-box. And that's it. Thanks for watching. For more help, please subscribe to the Garmin Support YouTube channel and visit marinesupport.garmin.com.